What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video, and make sure you leave a comment. So about a month and a half ago, I was reading that book, Remember the Devil's Butcher Shop? After I had finished reading my book, Blood on the Razor Wire, on the channel, people were like, yo, bro, you got to, read another prison book, man. Like, give us something. And people suggested The Devil's Butcher Shop. So what I did was I went ahead, jumped on Amazon or whatever. Well, really, my wife did. Ordered the book and said, you know what, man, we're going to read this book. I started reading it, and then it fizzled out. And people are like, man, why did you stop reading the book? And I'm like, well, keeping it real, it's kind of boring, man, in the beginning, right? When they're talking about the legislators and the law and, the warden and where they live. I'm like, man. So I just took the book and was like, out of here. But some people said, yo, bro, you got to finish reading that book. So I figured we'll just skip that boring part and get right to the takeover, right? That's about 60 pages in, man. Because that's the part that's exciting, man. People don't want to read about the legislators and all that nonsense. So what we'll do is we'll start reading the book. If you guys want me to keep reading it, I'll keep doing it. If not, this time, I will take it, The Devil's Butcher Shop, and we will butcher that thing up and put it in the fireplace and let it burn. But honestly, I think it is a good book. And I think that, the people that weighed in like, yo, man, do this, do that, then we're going to do it. If you guys like it, we keep going. If you don't, then we don't. So let's get to it, man. Let's get into the takeover, all right? And then we'll discuss some of it. My perspective on riots in New Mexico and what was going on in that jail system. Friday, February 1st, 1980. The day dawns after 7 with high, soiled clouds dimming the sun. The wind whips the treeless plateau less harshly than usual, dying through the day and night until the next morning. Smoke from smoldering cell blocks and corpses will curl almost motionless over the desert. Damn. But daybreak is still cold, harsher than the 20 degrees recorded on thermometers at the guard's trailer court, just to the west on the prison grounds. Inside the pen, the morning heat is triggered. It pushes unevenly over the familiar official contours as the prison stirs to the day. There are the hard textures of concrete and tile and pockmarked porcelain, poorly painted flaking steel, and tattooed skin. Ordinary sounds here: lone footsteps, doors shut, sudden voices down a corridor are hollow and crashing. And those who lived in it would never forget the odor, even when they had left it far behind. Not quite fecal, speaking more of rust and ruin and cheap disinfectant, and a mixture of private and public staleness. The hidden sour scent of 1,000 confined men. On this February morning, over 400 of those men have nothing to do. No educational program or work or even porter's rounds, except to mark again their sounds and smells. Man, when I get out of here, there may be some things I'll have the guts to do, one inmate has written in a poem to his parents. But one thing I promise, your boy Tom, don't tease no monkeys in the zoo again. In the first moments of light, the secretary to the prison intelligence officer calls in sick. She fears some kind of disturbance. She'll explain subsequently to an official inquiry, although she has no specific knowledge. Now the secretary simply tells the pen that she is staying home. Later in the morning, a prison pointedly drops out of the college program. Before noon, he explains to a staff officer that he is afraid that hostages will be taken sometime that day in the school dorm. A guard notices an unusually large group of convicts gathered in the central corridor just after lunch, whispering and agitated. But the officer apparently does not report it until days afterward. They knew a guard will say bitterly about the administration a few days later. They knew, he will insist, whatever is reported or unreported in these last hours. In the psychological unit that Friday afternoon, the well-connected inmate clerks hear that something will finally happen on Monday, February 4th, around the morning work call. But as one of the clerks closes his part of the unit and walks home early to his South Wing dormitory, he feels the mood of the penitentiary change, feels it go raw as he later testifies. Let me just interrupt for a minute, right? When you're in prison and everything gets quiet or something's about to happen, and those of you that are watching that been there, you can feel it, man. You know that something's about to go down. You know it before it happens. It's just in the air. It's in the atmosphere, man. And I guess that's what these guys were experiencing that day, right? My gut level feeling told me that something was not right, he will remember. The clerk goes back to the psychological section until the day's visitors leave. 10 local women who are there meeting with the unit's acting class. In the prison's incoming and classification unit, Friday is usually a light day. They do not often process new convicts at the weekend. But this Friday, There are still 3 or 4 inmate files to be worked and entered into the official count when the pen computer access routinely shuts down at 4 o'clock p.m. The files are left. A staff worker will remember later in the desk drawer of an associate warden to be entered the next Monday morning. But then there will be no Monday morning for the office, and the files are never found. The new men are in the pen this Friday night, but they will never be counted among the 1,157 officially reconstructed from computer records as the population on February 1st, 1980. Afterward, without knowing about the files in the drawer, an inmate clerk in an administration remembers the late commitments and realizes that for the weekend, the only accurate census of prisoners would be on a wax board in the control center, on which guards recorded and adjusted the count in grease pencil. The inmate clerk and a guard from the day shift that Friday remember the grease board tally vaguely as 1,160-something. Ain't that crazy? They don't even know how many people are in the jail. It is the beginning of chaos and inmate accountability that will reach 18 months beyond this weekend, spinning a sequel of blunder and evasion and of still unanswered questions about how many men would actually die in the horror of the next 36 hours. 36 hours of horror. One of the most violent and dangerous prison riots ever recorded in the U.S. At 5:30 p.m., the sun is down. A clearing desert sky annihilates the frail heat of the day. The temperature sinks swiftly into the teens. A plump fluorescent moon appears over the Sangre de Cristo. An inmate with windows in its globe will recall superstitiously the ghost white light and the lunar astrology of violence. A full moon, some believe, compels killing, and this night only proves it. By mid-evening, however, what is far more compelling for the moment is the pungent, unmistakable aroma wafting through the south wing and into the central administrative area. By 8 o'clock, later testimony will document at least half the pen absolutely reeks of the home brew, crudely but efficiently fermented in the southwestern second floor lateral of the dormitory E2. The nervous convict distillers in E2 cannot quite believe the guards are ignoring the redolence, that they are not letting it hang there until the goon squad bursts in to met out punishment. It is only the beginning of their fear and mounting disbelief. The leaders of E2 are gladiators, the remaining heavies in population, after the December escapees have been locked away in cell block 3. They have expelled the blacks from the dorm. By the Penn Society's natural selection on the basis of strength and bravado and gang cohesion, they have assumed their own control over the unit. The regime is a coalition of Spanish and Anglo and is not particularly despotic as convict governments go. They practice little extortion on their subjects, but this is clearly a strong dormitory, far more in charge of its own daily affairs than most sections of the penitentiary. Since their transfers from cell block 5 in the fall, the new men of E2 have it together, and they have it good, as they will recount. From available homosexual favors and drugs to the petty deference to their authority. The subsequent official explanation of the riot will ascribe it to lack of inmate incentives for order. No dormitory now benefits more from the prevailing order at the New Mexico Penitentiary than E2. Among their perquisites is the home brew they are opening tonight, an 8-gallon store made in plastic garbage bags and a large cardboard box. It has been cooking away chemically in the pipe chase, the most obvious of hiding places. The box is then taken out and simply shoved to the side, between bunks, as guards come through for the evening count after 10 p.m. They're starting their drinking late in E2. Some of the leaders, some who help make the brew, get back from work assignments well after nightfall. Like dutiful suburban housewives waiting for their returning husbands for the first cocktail, E2 holds off dipping until everyone is home from the office. There's no general premonition abroad in the pen this night. A few men up and down the corridor feel something, like the taut sense felt early by the psychological unit clerk, and they lie awake. Yet many prisoners are in their bunks before midnight. Even in E2, the drinking begins as one more party. Only 15 of the dormitory's 62 inmates are the strong men. Scarcely jailhouse lawyers or convict political leaders, like the Durans, they are what their lawyers will later aptly call them, the Sankalets, the ruffians on the penitentiary revolt. Yet in the end, there will be the riot's haunting moral about these prisoners' wild, reckless action and its hideous sequel will provoke more genuine reform that will most eloquent pleading. Now, in the Friday night hours between 10:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., they drink heavily. As they drink, they become surly and brash, and they boast and prod for some payback, some act of defiance. And as they agitate, they need no more numbers, no precise cause, or plan. In Santa Fe's oppression, they are guerrillas in friendly territory, fish in the proverbial sea of despair. Neither they nor their acquiescent majority in E2 know what they will achieve, what they will bring down. But their imprisonment here describes a sheer hopelessness and boredom, a numbness that moves them all to go along. It wasn't over anything great and grandiose, one inmate swore afterward. By 11:30, they have almost decided to jump the graveyard shift guards when they come through, with the usual slovenly security in an hour or so to close down the dormitory day room, or common, with its television set. They didn't secure any of the doors, one con told a television interviewer later. They never secure the doors. At the same time, however, men who are later tried as conspirators are also by this hour dizzy, if not drunk. If there is a grand conspiracy to kidnap a jail, as the state will claim, the scheming authors have senselessly dulled their minds for its execution. They will have talked about this night, this act, for 2 hours at the most. They are about to do it because, in the haze and alcohol-blurred extremity of the moment, any pen moment, for decades, there seems no real reason not to. At 11:45, the morning guard watch gathers, with the usual murmurs and scuffling of shoes, for the routine briefing by Captain Joe B. Baca, a longtime guard and now shift commander of the evening crew. According to the later report of the Attorney General's inquiry, Baca says nothing about a potential incident, and apparently nothing about the odor of home brew in the South Wing. The new shift taking over has been on graveyard for 2 months. There are 27 employees altogether. 9 are outside the pen in towers, on patrol, or on other duties. 2 female officers watch the women's annex in an adjacent building within the compound, but outside, the penitentiary perimeter fence. And 15 guards and 1 civilian medical technician are left inside the institution to oversee the 1,157 inmates then recorded there. They will be outnumbered nearly 80-1 in a prison configured to hold safety and humanely no more than 850 people. And that's another big thing with riots, man. Like, they overcrowd these jails, and then they send these people in there 80-1. And I had a cop tell me, a lieutenant one time in Raybrook, right? Lieutenant St. Louis told me, he said, "You think I don't know? We run this prison because you guys let me." And when he said that, it just kind of resonated, and I'm like, wow, that's the truth, right? The prisoners let the guards run the prison. And I'm not promoting any type of revolt or riot in any prison, but it's just reality. And when you start mixing drinks in, and those of you that read my book or heard me read the book, that's what happened on that fateful night for the cop at Big Sandy. When Adam was getting drunk, it was over with, man. His mind was somewhere else, and he was ready for action. And, that's what was going on here. These dudes are getting drunk. They're like, I don't like the way these people are treating me. We're about to get busy. But let's get back to the book. The shift is almost a character of history of pen staffing. One of these guards, 60%, have worked less than 3 years. Some as little as 4 months. An illustration of the astronomical turnover rate. Only 1 officer has lasted more than 3 years, yet less than 20. The remainder are fixtures of 2 decades or more. Fewer than a third of their corps have even minimal training. Remember, we just talked to Lieutenant. He talked about the training, how trash it is. In command is Captain Greg Roybal, 52, a short, slack man with 21 years on the job. His deputy, the same age and physical condition, is Lieutenant Jose Anaya, who has worked as a guard for a quarter century, with no written record in 1980 of any formal training in corrections. Following Baca's shift briefing, Roybal makes the post assignments for his contingent. Besides Lawrence Lucero in the control center, there are to be 7 guards for the South Wing, 5 and the medical technician for the North. Their average age is 34, a typical mingling of unschooled veterans and inexperienced newer men. The recently hired men have been lucky, one guard later tells an official inquiry, to get more than a tour of the pen as a basic orientation. For all the men, old and new, there are written posts, orders, and policies supposedly governing procedures and basic security. But this night, as so many others, for example, no post order mentions the elementary precaution of closing the central corridor grills during evening and night shifts. Security Chief Coronis has not made an inspection of the grills for a long time, as the Attorney General gingerly puts it afterward. Besides staff men confide, some of the senior officers like to have the grills open in the corridor and on the south side, if only to make it easier to sneak up on guards who are off sleeping during the shift. They're worrying about the wrong shit, right? The commanders tiptoe in, and there is said to be great glee and a suitable ceremonial chewing out when a dozing culprit is caught. So it's like a joke, right? Dude falls asleep, we run up on him. Leave the corridors open, man. Let people get busy. By midnight, Roybal is satisfied that the evening count is complete, and thus routinely relieves Baca's watch. 20 minutes later, Roybal and Anaya are in the inmates' mess to check on the preparation of the next day's breakfast. Will there ever be breakfast? At about 1:10 a.m., they begin to walk down the central corridor to the south wing to do a customary check of the dormitories and cell houses, and to help close down the day rooms, where on weekends prisoners are allowed to watch television until 1:30 a.m. Ahead of them are 5 other junior officers already beginning to close down the nearest cell houses. The 2 commanders begin their rounds by passing the central corridor grill, and like the warden and his deputy, like other ranking officials who have walked across the same fateful boundary so often over the past months, they leave the grill open. Still, there is one more chance here. Moments after Rabel and I pass the open grill, another officer comes down the corridor. Herman Gallegos, nearly 50, has more than a quarter century behind him as a guard, and tonight he is joining the graveyard shift's close down, in addition to his duties as a work release officer. He is an easy man to get along with, fair with inmates and respected by them, and unlikely to provoke controversy with his employers. Gallegos cannot recall whether the central corridor grill was open or closed when they went in by it that night. He will later testify, but he left it as he had found it. The first closing go without incident. Roybal and Anaya join guards Michael Schmidt and Ronnie Martinez to secure dormitory B1, just across the hall and a story down from E2. Schmidt is 25, a burly officer of only a few years' experience. At 18, Martinez has worked at the pen only since the previous autumn, and he is already solely responsible for the care, custody, and control of more than 200 inmates in 3 Southside dormitories, including E2. After locking B1, Anaya turns left toward the end of the south wing to help another guard secure dormitory D1. The other group of 4 guards is up the corridor shutting dorms A1 and A2. It is almost 1:30 a.m. Roybal, Schmidt, and Martinez climb the stairs across the hall and prepare to close down E2. As he takes the steps towards E2, Martinez has with him the keys to that dorm, as well as to B1 and B2, the other units under his supervision. Schmidt carries the keys to E1. Since the other group of guards working up the corridor is similarly spread out to cover several dorms and cell houses, the keys to all the south units are now on the wing at the same moment. So are Roybal and Anaya. Again, though, neither Santa Fe's post orders nor written policy expressly prohibits it. Standard prison security dictates that the shift supervisor and his deputy should never be together on one side of the pen or in one unit, leaving the rest of the institution without supervision. At the door of E2, the guards pause. Once more routinely, Schmidt, following procedure, gives young Martinez the keys to E1. 2, sometimes 4 officers, including both shift supervisors, usually close the day rooms. The guards gather at the door and give any other keys to the officer who will man the door. Within, through the dirty door window, the dormitory is shrouded in darkness. The small blue nightlights are still burned out. Long ago reported, but still unreplaced. Only the faint cast of lights from the lavatory, outside the unit door and from the perimeter fence, through the dormitory's grimy barred windows, silhouettes and the still forms in the room. Inside E2, the tough men are scared. Some lying in the blackness with heads still sticky, reeling from the home brew, listening for the guards. One man sheepishly remembers long afterward that he almost defecates in his pants in the minutes before the officers climb the stairs. Another thinks he can hear hearts beating everywhere, a loudening drumbeat of the punks around him that will only alert the screws, he thinks with disgust, until he realizes it is his own pulse. But it is too late to stop. They have bragged and postured and spent too much. They are more afraid not to act. At least they will have the initiative. For all the warnings, snitching, and premonitions, there is no sign yet that their play is expected. When officers are in the dorm at night, especially near the day room at the far end, the guard at the door cannot distinguish them from inmates. He makes out only moving bodies. The bunks of the dorm are, as always, doubled along the side, set perpendicular to the lateral wall. Perpendicular. 2 rows of single beds lie down the center of the dormitory, flanking the double bunks, creating 2 narrow aisles on each side. In the crowded bunking, every space between the double beds is a nighttime hiding place from which a prisoner can jump someone in the aisle. The beds begin close enough to the dormitory entrance for inmates to strike the door in a short bound from where they lie. One officer who works the dorms regularly, who walks the 60-foot gauntlet past the double bunks to clear out and lock the day room at the end of the dormitory, will later tell an investigator that every time he reports for night duty, he wonders whether he will leave the penitentiary alive. Sounds like Big Sandy. Tonight is the same, and the men are waiting, unseen. According to security procedures, the officer at the door is to let his fellow guards into the dorm and then, while they are closing the day room and checking the dorm, keep the door closed, shutting and securing it with an audible crack of the lock. Guards who go inside the units describe that sound at their back as one of the terrors of duty. A small metallic clap, far louder than its actual report. A sudden resounding announcement to everyone that the keeper is now in the cage himself. Kind of like a zookeeper going in there with a lion, right? And tonight is the night. Tonight, they're going to encounter the lions. But more often in Santa Fe, the man at the door holds it open a few inches or else turns the key the other way to hold the snap lock and so closes the door without securing it, only giving the appearance of locking it. A few moments before, Royable, Schmidt, and Martinez have come through a gate at the stairway to E2, a gate that should be similarly secured. They have left it unlocked. It is now almost 1:40 a.m. Martinez unlocks the door to E2, opens it out toward him, and steps back to let Captain Royable and Schmidt inside. The dormitory is quiet. The men, apparently asleep and orderly. Far too orderly, the convicts suddenly worry, but the guards do not seem to notice and come on in. Schmidt walks quickly up the left aisle toward the day room, Royable more slowly up the right. What Martinez does at this instant with the door will never be clear, whether he locks it or leaves it ajar, or shuts it but leaves it unlatched. For only seconds later, Lieutenant Anaya comes up the stairs, like the other men, through the unused riot control grill at the center corridor and through the unlocked gate at the stairway to E2 to help in the closing. Anaya is at the door, and Martinez opens it again to let him in. What happens to the door now will remain all too vivid in the memories of the men who lived in the moment. Anaya starts up an aisle, and for a fleeting time, incredibly, there is a last warning, as if the history about to unfold shrinks back one more time. In the quiet, dark, unusually subdued dormitory, an inmate near the door, one of the strong men, abruptly sits up in the bed with a rustle, fully dressed, as if rushing his cue, which is exactly what he is doing. For a few seconds, the officers and the anxious Khan look at one another in puzzlement, perhaps in the last glance of the old regime at Santa Fe. Then it is past. The Khan lies back down. The guards walk deeper into the room. Schmidt is just inside the day room. Royable, halfway along the right aisle. Anaya, a few bunks down the same row. Suddenly, an inmate near the entrance hurls himself at the door, and a partner follows almost immediately. There is a thud as the door is hit, and Martinez throws back. A sudden scuffling as he pushes to hold the door, but the sound dies in the stairwell. At the crash, Schmidt steps back into the left aisle. Royable and Anaya turn toward the door. In a frozen moment, one of them is jumped by the first inmate. No one can remember precisely who, and at least some of the watching prisoners believe that if the guard simply throws off the attack, displays some sudden power like a television hero, the uprising will be squashed. But the Khan and the guard struggle an instant too long, the guard too weakly. A dozen men join the fight, springing from bunks onto the other two officers, pounding the door open and dragging Martinez inside. Out come the shanks, the ubiquitous homemade prison knives, and clubs and axe handles hoarded and secreted in preparation for violence. It is no match. Royable and Anaya are small middle-aged men in poor shape to fight. Martinez, simply too young. Schmidt, though, he has the youth and size to put up a struggle. He is jumped by several men. The attackers are younger, quicker, stronger. Many are regular weightlifters in the Penn gym. This bloodiest, most anarchic of American prison riots now begins. Not with a wild rush or screams, but with an almost controlled pause and quiet. The inmates methodically strip, tie, and blindfold their 4 captive guards. Some of the cons in E2 still do not believe it will work. They still think that they can hold the officers for a while, but there will eventually be an attack, a shit-stomping by other guards, as one of them later remembers his fears, and they will all go to the hole. But the adrenaline is flowing, burning away the haze of the homemade brew and their hesitation, and they soon act. At least one of them acts immediately, and by himself takes the insurgency further than anyone has imagined. Within minutes after the seizure of the guards, a muscular young Hispanic Khan has put on Royable's uniform shirt and a bandana. Armed with a shank and reckless machoism, he tells the others he's going out alone, and then he plunges through the dorm door. He spills down the stairs through the unlocked gate and past the open riot grill into the dimly lit central corridor. He starts first across the hall to dormitory B, but then turns suddenly, whether it's sound or instinct, to cross back diagonally to dormitory F, just north of E. He is clearly looking for other guards he knows are closing down the rest of the wing. He runs through the open grill and stairwell gate in F, then up to the second floor, and there, in the small vestibule in front of the door to F2, which they have just locked, he confronts four more officers. They are Herman Gallegos, the congenial veteran, Juan Bustos, in his mid-20s with a year's experience. Another Gallegos, Victor, only 22, and with little tenure on the job, and Officer Elton Curry. At 49, Curry has been a guard for 3 years. He is a large physical man whom the prisoners call Bigfoot. It is another extraordinary scene. The men face each other in a moment of shock. Then the con brandishes his shank. Unarmed, Curry looks around desperately and reaches for a nearby trash can. He thrusts it forcibly at the inmate as the other three guards back up against the wall. For perhaps less than a minute, it is a close, even fight. Using the garbage pail as a foil and lance, Curry wards off the shank and pushes the con to the stairwell, forcing him to bend back over the rail a story above the concrete floor below. Again, the fate of the penitentiary, and of so many men, hovers in the seconds. Curry might have pushed the attacking con over the rail. The other guards might have gone back into F2, called the control center, or even rushed past the fighting men to close the central corridor grill to the south wing. But they do not. The con holds on, slashes back at Curry, and by then other inmates from E2 have ventured into the corridor, heard the fight, come to see the scene in front of F2. Finding Curry grappling alone with their partner, the cons overpower him, wrenching away his protective trash can and stabbing and beating him viciously for putting up a fight. Then they also seize the other guards. Out of this fateful joust, however, the inmates will have only 3 more hostages, not 4, and the incident reveals the mixed character, now mad and chaotic, now strangely, almost casually calculated, the riot has assumed from the beginning. In the confusion of the attack, by the rallying, the Attorney General's inquiry would later conclude. Herman Gallegos, the older, more benign guard, somehow slipped into F2 and took refuge in his day room where he was protected by sympathetic inmates. But several other accounts have the door to F2 already locked when the lone con confronts the officers in front of it, and then unlocked only by the inmates who moments later seize the guards and their keys. More likely, the prisoners simply let Gallegos go into the dormitory, a dispensation for his longtime decency. To some of their captives, some of the rioters, even among the feral men of E2, already high on their feet, will be sympathetic now and later. Though savage, the payback will not be blind, but amid so much atavism and treachery, the heroism and gentleness and loyalty will be largely overlooked. Such concepts do not easily fit into the preconceptions of the prosecutors and investigators who subsequently scavenge the history. After all, they only raise more questions about the reasons for the violence, about the men who did it, about justice, than official inquiries are prepared to pose. While a few inmates take the younger Gallegos and a bleeding Curry back into E2 day room, where the other guards are being held, another group strips, binds, and blindfolds the remaining guard, Juan Bustos. After looping a belt around his neck, they drag him painfully down the stairs to the central corridor. His feet raking the hard, sharp steps. As they reach the hallway, they pause with the blindfolded, terrified guard, pulling and kicking at him in their own fright and exhilaration as they contemplate how they will now use him. Inmates from E2 and F2 are now flowing into the hall, small clusters of them with captured keys, beginning to unlock the adjacent dormitories. A and B and F1, it is little more than 10 minutes since Ronnie Martinez opened the door to E2, except for the running footsteps, the cries of Bustos as he is struck, muffled, echoing shouts as liberators call out to their friends. The south wing is still curiously quiet. Outside guards sense no eruption, only the occasional tapping on the tower windows of a faltering north wind. At 1:57 a.m., the riot announces itself. The inmates have taken the officers' two-way radios as well as their keys. In the control center, guard Lawrence Lucero, an officer in his early 20s and with only 3 years' experience, is startled from his graveyard tour quiet as a strange voice. Obviously an inmate suddenly crackles out of their sour night air of the pen from one of the two-way radios. "We've got the shift commander hostage," the voice tells the unknown receiver. "There had to be a meeting with the governor, the news media, and Rodriguez. It is a simple, stark notice and demand. spoken deliberately over the sound of the running footsteps in the south wing, aimed at anyone and everyone down the long corridor to the rest of the prison. The message is strangely terse, mentioning nothing of the other hostages, the territory seized, the consequences if the demand goes unmet. But the first riot message is also unmistakably political. The guards have been jumped an E2 in a drunken brashness. The entire South Wing seized this Friday night in February, almost on impulse. The future course of the uprising will frequently be aimless and wild, with shifting, uncertain leadership and often politics will be an apparent afterthought. Yet this clipped ultimatum to Lucero will be testimony that the larger cause is always there. It's Royal who counts with the clique. The inmate on the radio knows well, and it is King and Rodriguez who will decide the fate of any reform, and they will be held accountable, if at all, only by the media. Minutes into the takeover, the announcement captures the history and politics of the New Mexico Penitentiary with a simplicity never improved upon in the tumult to follow. So that's a few pages, right? I mean, there's still a lot more. It's all small writing, very, very small writing. But the thing is this, right? Like prison riots, and I'm a firm believer that people should learn from history. They should learn from the New Mexico prison riots. They should learn from the Attica riots. That you can only push people so far, right? And sometimes we get guards on here, ex-cops, cops, and they make comments. Oh, no one gets treated. Listen, in prison, not always, but in a lot of instances, the cops look down on you. Like, we're your boss. We can do whatever the fuck we want to do to you. You know why? Because you're in a fucking prison, asshole. That's why. I was in a prison where, and it was an FCI actually, where they would tell, certain people, man, they'd be like, hey, man, get your ass on the wall. And they'd use derogatory terms, racial slurs. They didn't give a shit. One of the lieutenants was like, well, I got to let them know who's boss. I was just like, wow, man, this is how they talk to people. Man, this is how they treat people. And, you might be like, man, that's no reason to rebel, right? But you know what? People are tired of being kicked and punched and mistreated. Cops go in here. When I was in FMC Lexington, there was this black chick. I might have talked about this before. About 30 days before I'm released, she goes in my cell and just destroys my cell. Absolutely destroys my cell. Rips things up, dumps everything all over the place, and just leaves it like that, right? And when cops do stuff like that, you think in your mind, like, you don't think, well, she's a woman, or, people think more in the terms of, I'm a prisoner, she's a cop, and that's it. There's this team and that team. And you know what? You want to disrespect me? And sometimes people pop off. They get tired of the shit, right? They get tired of being treated like that. And in a low security, the cops think like, well, these people are in a low security. They ain't trying to do nothing. But sometimes people do. And I actually was in a unit in Coleman. Probably should do a separate story on this, where this guard was kind of like cool with the prisoners, right? Respectful, whatever. And there was this dude in there that had some mental health issues. And he would tell and I might be bringing a dude on hopefully soon that can talk about this too. Someone that I was in Coleman with. And the dude was like, what, you want to be a cop? Or you want to be a prisoner? Put on the jail clothes. Why are you always trying to be cool with prisoners? And man, he caught the dude coming out of the unit team. And those of you that know about the unit teams, you're off into this little secluded like doorway. And he waited for that dude to come out of that unit team, man. He just he whopped this dude, man. And the cop was on the ground getting beat for 2-3 minutes before his partner responded from next door. He ended up running over there and helping them, and they came in and they just started giving people bags and moved everyone out. But sometimes people just get tired, man. You get tired of being abused. And that's how I believe riots start, like here, on impulse. Of course there's other ingredients mixed in when people are starting to get drunk and like, yo, man, some people get beer muscles. But, some people get drunk like, man, you know what, man, fuck that, man. They don't start thinking about the consequences. They don't rationally think. They don't think like, if we do this, then this is what's going to happen. If we do this, then we could probably all get out of jail if we take them all hostage. We can all escape. Usually don't work that way. And I'm going to do a video about escape too. Probably a couple of them. Because don't think for a minute that there weren't times in my life, man, where I wanted to get the hell out of that place, man, where I was plotting and trying to figure it out. And I'm like, watching these shows on like National Geographic, and I'm like, man, these dudes are smart as hell to get out of these places. It was almost like I couldn't figure it out. I consider myself semi-intelligent, but I couldn't figure out how to get out. But that's a little bit on the New Mexico butcher shop. You guys want it, the Devil's Butcher Shop, and it's going to get viciously violent. But that's prison, right? I mean, some dudes are burned up with torches and all kinds of stuff. But we'll get there. If you guys want me to keep pushing, we're going to keep pushing it. Definitely, man, I think it's going to be an interesting book. I think we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn it together. The writing is super small, man, so sometimes I don't have my glasses on. So sometimes I might stumble here and there on a word or two. But forgive your boy, man. Blood on the Razor Wire TV, real and raw. Who doesn't read and get a little tied up? You know what I mean? Sometimes people have left comments when I was reading the other book, like, I don't know, man. Some dumbass comments acting like I was stupid. I ain't stupid. Stupid. I'm just joking. But anyway, man, it's all good, man. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We got some more good stuff coming out, interviews, some more of my own personal stories. We're going to go back out in the hood as soon as it warms up. I had a freaking snow blizzard yesterday morning, man. It's cold here. But as soon as this weather gets better, we're going in the street again. Blood on the Razor Wire TV. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you leave a comment, and we'll be back at you tomorrow. With respect, until tomorrow, we're out.